just really tough for some decks to beat.
That's a lot of flash elements at play there, and then more of a traditional ramp deck for Eric Froehlich. It's going to be Paradise Druids Arose ramping into 4 copies of Nisu Shakes the World on that side of the table.
Yeah, I think Froehlich is pretty well set up. I like his list quite a bit. Carvalho's is interesting, though, and I think both have their merits.
Carvalho, no third land in hand just yet, as Froehlich deploys a Paradise Druid on turn number 2. We're going to see the saddest Shark Typhoon, just a cycle for no token.
Yeah, but that's kind of the beauty of Shark Typhoon. It's almost never dead, you know? Like, even on turn 2, if you need to hit a land drop, you can cycle it. You know, it's just great at every juncture.
Yeah, you always get something, and sometimes you get a thing that wins the game very easily. This one helps a lot, as it gets 2 cards down, and that's where Marcio finds land number 3 and scries a 4th to the top.
Yeah, even if he had missed on the Temple of Mystery, he would have got another look at it.
Here's an attempt at Teferi, a Master of Time. Carvalho's thinking that Planeswalker looks thirsty. That's going to get quenched.
I'm sorry, that was too good. I would expect a main phase Nightpack Ambusher here. Both players know each other's deck lists, and they know that there's counterspells running back and forth. However, it could just be like a hold up multiple iterations of things, like counterspells, Bone Crusher Giant, things like that. I'm very surprised to not see any move on his own turn, though.
It was kind of a lot of options. You know, Stomp on the Druid plus Ether Gust was a potential turn. Just jamming Nightpack Ambusher now or later. Chose to just kind of hang on. We see it's very Master of Time for Froehlich. This time it's going to resolve and do some looting. Now Marcio gets to play a Nightpack Ambusher. Because Teferi gets activated on both turns, you can't quite attack the Teferi down, but at least Marcio has a 4/4 now.
Yeah, but after this loot, I would imagine that Marcio's going to slam another Nightpack Ambusher, which is going to... Oh, wow. That's not what I expected to happen.
Phasing. Some respect to the line you were describing. A second Ambusher could pump you up to 5 and beat a loot. You miss out on your loot, but you play around that pattern here. Froehlich's going to maintain that Planeswalker.
You also miss out on your Wolf token at the end of turn because it's not in play to trigger.
Yeah,
God, phasing is so weird.
A lot to like about that line from Froehlich.
It was instantaneous, too. Just no thought. If he had looted, Marcio would have slammed a second Nightpack Ambusher almost 100%, killing the Teferi and leaving him with just an overwhelming board presence. Now, Marcio might be in a little bit of a pickle. He can deal with the Teferi with the Bone Crusher Giant, and he has Ether Ghost at the ready, so it's not detrimental, but, you know.
We see a Stomp takes out Paradise Druid. All right, so what Marcio is doing, leaving up Ether Gust, can still stomp the Teferi even after Froehlich uses it on this turn.
Yeah, holding up the Ether Gust, like, just in case the worst happens, basically.
The worst being this Nisu Shakes the World that is in Froehlich's hand.
Oh, absolutely. It is the card. It is the one.
Land number 5 for Froehlich is going to be a Fabled Passage that'll find a land right away. And here is that attempt at Nissa. Yeah, we'll try again later on that. Ether Gust, fired off by Carvalho.
Yeah, now the Nightpack Ambusher is going to be able to rumble in and kill the Teferi no matter what. Carvalho still has Bone Crusher Giant at the ready. Wouldn't be surprised to see a main phase Nightpack Ambusher as well. But since both players have access to deck lists, main phasing it doesn't matter as much. Froehlich has a couple copies of Ether Gust, but he's way more of a traditional ramp strategy with a bunch of blue cards that say draw a card on them to turn on Joel Rail. So that Nightpack Ambusher, not necessarily a must main phase. And also, since the Wolf triggers, it's better not to play anything on your own turn.
Yep, so the Ambusher cuts down Teferi after Teferi loots that Nissa back into Froehlich's hand, makes a Wolf. Now we're back on Froehlich's side. Another attempt at Nissa. This time it's good, but how good is it at this point of the game?
Well, it's a little bit better than it looks. The 3/3 obviously facing down against a Wolf, not so good, but the way that the Nissa is going to generate some extra mana, I feel like we can get Jor-El active here, and maybe that ends up making the Landlord Visionary a little bit better down the line. The problem is you have to trade the Forest here with the 3/3, and I'm not sure that Froehlich's going to be able to keep this Nissa alive if Marceau really wants to kill it.
And so land is animated. Jor-El shows up. Carvalho is going to flash in that second Night Pack Ambusher. Some really large creatures here. You see an attack at the Nissa. Carvalho could get really aggressive and use this Stomp and or this Flame Sweep to clear blockers, but just settles for attacking it for now. No rush on that. Gets Wolf tokens by not casting them.
Yeah, getting the Wolf tokens is a huge deal. Basically putting Froehlich in a spot where he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. If he goes for like a double block on the 4/4, single Stomp crushes him. If he tries to double chump block, 4 damage still comes through, and the Stomp can finish on an upkeep while still giving him the 2 Wolf tokens. So just riding the Night Pack Ambusher to victory there did Marceau Carvalho.
And the Forest on top for Froehlich. With the Nissa defeated, he's heard this story before. Players are going to game number 2.
Yeah, and both players are going to be looking at the sideboard to effectively like get rid of creature-related interaction in favor of maybe some counter spells to keep some of these heavy hitters off the table. Night Pack Ambusher is such a great card because it not only does it have flash, but it also just dominates the battlefield. In multiples, it's incredible. And it dodges one of the most powerful cards in the matchup, Mystical Dispute.
Nice sideboarding here for Froehlich. The main deck seems to heavily emphasize Jor-El. Those are all on the sideboard now. And right now you see Carvalho looking at leaving in a good chunk of Flame Sweep and Bonecrusher Giant.
Yeah, it turns out when your opponent has a bunch of 2 damage stuff, especially considering Flame Sweep, you just board it out. You just board out your young Pyromancers, you know?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. You know, Froehlich leaves in cards like Llanowar Visionary, but there's not a real cost to that. That card just cantrips.
Right. Cantrips, and if left unfettered, has a pretty significant impact if you're able to play it early enough, and it lets you just play Nissa Shakes the World a turn faster. It also helps defend it. Llanowar Visionary has actually been somewhat impressive for me, even in Pioneer. I quite like the card. I think it's extremely good.
Yeah, I played a bit of Core Set 2021 sealed deck when the set dropped, and I would curse loudly every time my opponent played Llanowar Visionary.
Oh yeah, no, it's hard to win. It's so good, especially when they're on the play, and that's like their Grey Ogre draws a card and taps for mana, and yours is just a Grey Ogre that doesn't do either of those things.
Phyrexian Rager could never.
Oh man, that actually makes me mad. I love Phyrexian Rager. I just forgot about it.
Yeah, that card is still just like good.
Yeah.
And here is Llanowar Visionary. Froehlich curving Paradise Druid into that. We see a Quench. Limited window for the efficacy of a card like that for Carvalho, so you kind of use them early and often. And a nice pickup on turn number 3. Carvalho finds land number 3. And it's a red source too, so it opens up a lot of the hand.
There is the dreaded Arboreal Grazer after hitting all your land drops. That's generally my experience with Arboreal Grazer, personally. Like, I don't know how you feel about it. Like, I like it a lot when I'm playing stuff like Nistor's Pilgrimage in Pioneer, or if I'm playing like Cultivate in Standard. You know, if I'm playing 30 lands, it's like fine most of the time. But holy crap, if you draw it on turn 4 and you just like don't have a land in hand, it's so bad.
It's always good against me, and every time I register more than one, I'm always trying to trim them because I just peel them at the worst times.
See, I think the joke is that it's just horrible at most times, except on turn 1 where it's Mox Diamond.
Something like that.
Which conveniently, like, Mox Diamond's also like trash after turn 1 usually, so it makes a lot of sense.
We see Stomp took care of Paradise Druid, and Froehlich has chained just Hydroid Crisis as 2/2s, cantripping. Found land number 4. We'll be looking for land number 5 here. And now both players missing on that 5th land and just with a bunch of counter spells in hand.
Yeah. I think Carvalho has the advantage just because he has a slightly larger creature. Froehlich can't really do a ton about it. And Carvalho, with the Bonecrusher Giants, effectively just has answers for some of these smaller creatures, whereas Froehlich doesn't. And that might just end up being all the difference.
Yeah, 4/3, just kind of owning the battlefield right now. Stomp, threatening to take down that Hydroid Crisis. We see Froehlich's going to fight over that with Ether Gust. Carvalho has 2 Mystical Disputes, could potentially pick this fight.
could also just put it on top and just reset the turn, just go for it again next turn. Because, like, if Froehlich is fighting over keeping a 2/2 Hydroid Krasis alive, great. That's fine. Like,
yeah, just with the texture of combat here, the way the damage race is going, Carvalho is favored if things just stay the same, which 2 counterspells can go a long way at keeping things the same. We do see the first dispute cast, though, and this starts a war because Froehlich just sitting on 2 disputes of his own.
I feel like this has become the crux of the game, but we're doing it on Eric Froehlich's turn, which means that now Carvalho literally just needs to peel a land, and then he wins. Like, he can't really win this combat because he initiated the fight, and both players have 2 mystical disputes. So, like, if Froehlich wants to win, he can. But the problem is he's winning a fight over nothing. Like, he's winning a fight over a 2/2 Hydroid Krasis getting stomped.
Yeah, so the big potential draw here for Carvalho, if land number 5 comes off the top untapped, that means he's first to market on Nissa. And the thing that you like on Carvalho's side is if that fails, there's still just a Frilled Mystic, and you just burn through all these mystical disputes from Froehlich.
Right. Frilled Mystic does look a little awkward in the face. Oh, here it comes.
And there is land number 5. It's a Fabled Passage. That means untapped mana source. That means an attack for 7 forthcoming and a really beefy Planeswalker with it.
Yeah, and now if Froehlich's able to untap and find a 5th land of his own, he can match with Nissa. But if you've played any Standard for the last 2 years, you know that whoever plays the second Nissa Shakes the World is at a huge disadvantage, because not only are you trading after getting hit, you're also just second to untap with all your extra mana.
So there is land number 5 for Froehlich. What you're saying makes a lot of sense. Now, this is what Froehlich needed to stay in the game at all.
Right.
Gonna need a little bit help to be more competitive from here. You see he wakes up an island, tries to go for Carvalho's Nissa. Lands will trade off. That's kind of an eventuality, so I like the block from Carvalho. Now a Shark Typhoon off the top. Now this is probably why we see that Whirlwind Denial coming in out of the sideboard from Froehlich in the hand there. So timing on how this plays out could be interesting from here.
Yeah, there's a lot of decisions to be made this turn. There wasn't a way to make like a huge Shark Typhoon and still hold up Frilled Mystic. It would have been like a little too small, I think. I wouldn't have mind seeing just like a full-blown tap-out Fiesta, though, but maybe he's just so far ahead that holding up Frilled Mystic just matters too much.
So woke up a land, attacked Froehlich's Nissa, Krasis jump block to keep it around, but once again, Carvalho, the only player with creatures on the battlefield. Froehlich will animate a land to try to catch up on that front.
Yeah, this is going to be a semi-blowout, but it's not going to be that bad. I think that Carvalho is probably going to go for a medium-sized Shark Typhoon to block this 3/3, but instead it's just going to get hit with a Whirlwind Denial. Nissa's going to take 3 down to 4, but it's going to leave Froehlich just like a little too far behind on the battlefield with a much lower life total.
Yeah, so it in terms of micro interactions, this is why you like Whirlwind Denial, but the texture of combat is already pretty rough for Froehlich, so it's kind of a necessary thing to try to stay competitive.
Yeah, 3-mana counterspells aren't exactly ideal in this format, but they're kind of a necessary addition to these blue decks because the cards are just so powerful. And Whirlwind Denial just very specifically answers Shark Typhoon completely for 3 mana, and occasionally counters other things. But the fact that it's a 3-mana counterspell that also can stop a Shark Typhoon is a pretty big deal. It just so happens in this spot it's just not enough.
Right. The Denial does its thing, but the leftovers for Froehlich, we see Arboreal Grazer and a land drop.
Oh,
and the heat keeps coming for Carvalho. There's a Bone Crusher Giant off the top. Doesn't do anything against these blockers, but it's 2 pretty reasonable cards in hand versus an opponent that's empty. Now the matter seems to be about just being the player with the Nissa advantage. Yeah, all the creatures are going to come at Froehlich's Nissa.
somewhat just surprised to see Carvalho go for Nissa instead of Face. If he sends everything Face, there's a good chance that Froehlich just doesn't chump with the O3, and that means that Efro just goes down to 2 life and a stomp closes the game. But cleaning up the Nissa guaranteed is just really important.
Yeah, cleaning up the Nissa just makes it so the best top deck from Froehlich, Hydroid Crisis, is nothing. It might not be enough anyway, as we see Battlefield cleaned up. Stomp goes for the Nissa, and Eric Froehlich's going to pick him up. Marcio Carvalho with a pretty commanding 2-0 win in the matchup.
Yeah, the 2-0 win there for Carvalho. His deck just having access to those red cards, Stomp.